Let's talk about the cloud of unknowing, the subject of veracity, of no longer being able to depend on what you see and you hear, has become particularly urgent. This week, I want to talk about the texture, the atmosphere in which we do our politics at the moment, particularly in the context of the Gaza-Israel crisis. And I want to bring together two different things. One is what people call conspiracy theories, things like the Great Replacement Theory. There is a plot to remove white people from Europe and replace them by black and brown-skinned people, particularly Muslims.
The Democratic Party is trying to replace the current electorate, the voters now casting ballots, with new people, more obedient voters from the third world. That's what's happening, actually.
Or there is the Great Reset, which is a paranoid theory about the World Economic Forum and various generally Jewish cabals at the top of a global government trying to impose world government on the rest of us and wipe out billions of people while they do so.
The plan of the Great Reset is that you will die with nothing. To pull off this evil plan, Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum will need to take more than just material possessions.
These are, forgive my language, batshit crazy ideas. They're part of the Qanon family of conspiracy theories being pushed around the world, initially from America, but all over the place. And a remarkably large number of people, including in this country, actually believe them. According to a poll, some 32% of people believe that the Great Replacement Theory is true, and similar numbers for the Great Reset Theory and other fantasies of a globalized world government, either fascist or Stalinist or corporatist, depending on your prejudice. So that's one set of problems that we have. And as I say, I think it is a bit wider than many realise. People like me spend their lives looking at politics through the prism of Westminster and legislation and party conferences and debates about GDP and growth and all of that. But beyond my world, there's an entire other world of people who genuinely believe in a globalist government, in huge conspiracies in the clouds somewhere up there. And they go as far as kind of shape-shifting lizards and all of that, through to the very, very oldest conspiracy of all, which is the Jews are behind everything. So that is one area I think we need to kind of confront and think about more. But the other area, which comes alongside it, I think in a very malign and dangerous way, is the use of AI and other techniques to fake stuff. I was sent this week a very vivid film of a burning car in the street, perhaps from Lebanon or Israel. The entire thing was created by AI. It never happened. Quite recently, there was a very, very convincing little piece of audio about Keir Starmer losing his temper and swearing at his staffers.
The fucking tablet. Fuck's sake. I literally told you, didn't I? Fuck's sake. Bloody moron.
Never happened. A complete fake. I think quite soon we're going to ask ourselves whether we can believe anything that we see or read, either on the internet or indeed in the mainstream media. So much can be faked so effectively. And we're seeing this in particular around the Israel-Gaza conflict. Take the example, who destroyed that hospital, or who caused the slaughter of that hospital in Gaza?
Reports of an Israeli airstrike on a hospital in central Gaza.
His putting forward his evidence that Israel was not behind an explosion at a hospital in Gaza City.
This is clearly a war crime. I think everything points towards it being Israel.
Hamas and Islamic Jihad have so far offered little evidence to back their claims that Israel fired the missile at the hospital that night.
And there's an enormously complex argument going on around blast patterns, the sound signatures of missiles and all the rest of it. Huge numbers of experts poring over video footage and sound footage. And in the middle of all of that, yet more fakery, conversations spliced together and pushed out into the internet. And I conclude at the moment that an ordinary person, even somebody working quite hard, somebody with a certain amount of intelligence and even understanding or expertise in this area, has no idea of the truth. And I think this is an emblem of what we're going through at the moment. So much of what we see, the phosphorus attacks, blasts in one hospital, another, turn out to be film from another time, edited or changed to convince us. So we have two things. We have conspiracy theories, and we have a world in which we can't trust the facts that we are meant to be debating. And put the two together, and the entire business of doing normal democratic conversational politics becomes almost impossible. If you can't believe the basic facts, the reality of the world around you that you are discussing with other people, and if you are discussing with other people conspiracy theories that are so huge and grotesque and widely believed, there is almost no way in or out of them, then what we have in front of us is a cloud of unreason. Or you might say a cloud of unknowing. That was a phrase which comes from the 1300s, probably from a Leicestershire priest who wrote a spiritual guide to the cloud of unknowing, and he said we needed a privation or a lack of knowing in order to approach God. It's a kind of mystical belief, very, very potent at the time. And in the same way, I think we have a privation of knowing, a lack of understanding, and a lack of ordinary political connectivity in our conversation. And this is extremely concerning, particularly at the time when we have this enormous global threat of a full-scale Middle Eastern war. So a couple of obvious questions about all of this. Why now? Why is this particular danger to our democratic discourse happening right now? And I think the reasons are sort of geopolitical and economic. I think that over the last decade or so, the West, and in particular Western middle classes and Western working classes, have seen their societies' technological and industrial power just hoovered away and sucked over to China and other parts of the Eastern world. We no longer have the jobs, we no longer have the expertise, we no longer have the authority as societies that we used to have even a few years ago. And that is quite naturally producing an atmosphere of great fear and uncertainty, which I think is reflected in the conspiracy theories. Because if you believe there's a great big conspiracy responsible for everything going wrong in your world, then that is in a way quite reassuring. It's a bit like a kind of superhero film. If there's a conspiracy, there are baddies and there are goodies, and the goodies and the baddies can fight, and maybe the goodies will win. And if you look at the QAnon conspiracy around Trumpian America, that's very much what it's about. It really feels like some kind of Marvel comic strip when you strip it down. So it's a sense of the dislocation of Western elites and Western working class groups confronted with a world in which they're losing heft and losing power and trying to make sense of it. So I think that is a very important part of what's going on at the moment. And then you say, well, that's all very well, Old Marr, but what would you do about it? What is the answer? And in many ways, Old Marr says, well, the answer is the world we are leaving, the so-called mainstream media. I mean, you would expect me to say this. I've spent most of my life working in the mainstream media, but all my life I have been surrounded by, if you like, gatekeepers, sievers, graders, analysts. I've had the fact checkers, I've had editors, I've had sub-editors, always looking at the information coming in to me, asking for double checking, asking me to explain exactly where it comes from, and then analysing what I do with it and what I say about it. There's a whole intermediate class, the in-betweeners, if you like, whose job was to ensure that absolute, unadulterated bullshit didn't keep erupting on your television screens or your phones or whatever you were reading. And that world has basically been knocked sideways by the so-called social media, new media world. And so we are moving from a world in which all that pruning, that assessing, that fine-checking, that grading is being replaced by an instantaneous, unmediated, no consequences, very fast form of self-publishing in the new media. And that, I think, is a profound danger. And the way I'm talking, you might think I'm talking about young people not getting it. And that is absolutely not the case, because there's a big study by Princeton University in the States which looked at people who are very ready to pass on, frankly, sort of bullshit conspiracy theory ideas. And the vast majority of them are over 65. So this is something that particularly affects people who vote, because we know older people do vote, who are sitting in front of their computers and passing on really, really dangerous and nonsensical ideas right the way through our democracies. I think to combat this, we need politicians who speak much more clearly and much more assertively about this threat to our democratic conversation, who call out and describe explicitly what is happening to our societies as they lose heft, as they lose power, who don't carry on pretending that things are as they were. In other words, reflect the world to us as it really is. We need that. And we need to rely even more heavily on those people who are still doing the fact-checking and on whom we can depend. And I'm thinking about people like BBC Verify. I'm thinking particularly about the organisation Bellingcat, which has done so much incredibly useful work assessing different kinds of photographic evidence and film to call out what is not true. And so this is, in a sense, a slightly despairing cry for help in the middle of the media landscape as it is right now. I do fear we are almost at the position quite soon, particularly around the Gaza-Israel issue, where ordinary, responsible, democratic, progressive political conversation is about to be doused by the cloud of unknowing. If you'd like to stay up to date and you'd like to see the latest explainers, field reports, feature stories and special discussion episodes, then please, folks, subscribe to our channel today.
Brought to you by Canaccord Genuity Wealth Management. Experienced wealth managers who go above and beyond to guide and support you. Can do is more than just an attitude. Can do is navigating today for a brighter tomorrow.